Okay, good morning. Day 5 of our June plenary. Great evening last night. Thank you to the team for putting it together. It's always a good reminder that you need opportunities to celebrate, and we probably have had few and far between over the last few years. But I think it was a great evening. I'm glad did get an opportunity to celebrate you and a couple of our key staff members over the years, and so and it was good just to see everyone in a social setting. We do have some work left today. We're going to approve the ED on PI, but beforehand we're going to review the turnaround document on targeted issues on audit evidence. Look forward to a good discussion. I think you don't need much further introduction, Sue, but I'll turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the input over the last few days. And thank you to Phil and Dan and the task force for the task force has been working every evening and had homework, so to help us to turn it around. You had the revised draft yesterday, as we indicated in the headline. The changes from the clean version that we discussed on Monday are highlighted in the document that you have. The grey paragraphs we won't discuss today, other than maybe 13, because obviously there's changes to the application material. But the grey paragraphs are because we haven't fully discussed the changes, or we've got offline comments still to process. A lot of the comments we had on Monday related to the requirements. So as I said yesterday, the goal today really is to make sure we get through the requirements. And if we have capacity, we'll circle back on the objectives and definitions. But if we can't do that, the task force is very happy to receive offline comments, and we can consider that as we work towards September. Really keen that we get your input today, because obviously we are scheduled for approval in September. So we need to make sure we're as clear as to what the board is looking for as possible. Can we have the next slide, please? What I'll do is just walk you very briefly through the changes, the major changes, not the words and referencing and things, but the major changes we've made, so that you can see that. So in relation to paragraph 8, I'll start there and we'll do it kind of requirement by requirement. So paragraph 8, we made changes in response to the comments about the reference to assertions made by management could imply a focus on further audit procedures, but obviously designing and performing procedures in an unbiased manner relates to risk assessment as well. So we've removed the reference to assertions made by management and align the wording with the requirements in 315 and 540. We'll come to the application material in a minute. We still are looking to deal with the corroborate or contradictory to what element in the application material, rather than in the requirement itself. So if I move on to the application material and the main changes there, in A3M, the change there was again to provide more balance between risk assessment procedures and further audit procedures. And then A4, we had a number of comments both in the meeting and offline, and you'll see that A4 is no more. So we've obviously we reflected on the discussion about management's refusal to provide a requested representation would be a scope limitation. So we've moved that element. And the example about sales returns, which I think people found confusing, we've deleted. I think other changes were we moved a few things around. On A16A, the wording for risk assessment procedures it actually reflects the board discussion now that took place in relation to ISA 3115 when it was revised, but it also reflects that the expectations about risk of material misstatement shouldn't unfairly bias the risk assessment procedures. So the reference to the existence of risks is consistent to what we have in A238 of ISA 315. And the reference to management assertions for further audit procedures is consistent with A82 of ISA 540. So we're looking there to pick up existing wording we have to clarify the piece that the requirement relates to both risk assessment procedures and further audit procedures. So that's kind of a quick overview of the sort of what we did and why. And I think I would love to hear your feedback on paragraph 8 and the related application material. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. So, Josephine.
Good morning, Sue. I'd just like to thank you and the task force for all the hard work here. I think the changes here are absolutely excellent. It's now super or abundantly clear that this standard is about audit evidence that you gather throughout the audit process. So really appreciate the changes made. Thank you.
Diane.
Wow, that was quick. Good morning. Yes, I agree. I think the changes you made are crystal clear. Thank you for removing the paragraph about the sales returns. I think that was probably wise and wasn't necessary. So I'm very supportive of the changes that you made. Thank you, and thanks to the team.
Diane, I noticed you have a sticker on your computer today. What does that sticker say?
You are very observant. Are you an auditor? My sticker.
One.
Yes, you'd be an excellent auditor. I have 2 stickers. They say the same thing. I love journal entries, and special thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Wendy.
Thank you, Tom. Shall I reserve comments on 6 and 7 till later? Is that coming up? Okay, so then I'm give you a lot of credit for what has been done. And I have no other comments on, I think 8 is a great improvement. Thank you. And the related application material.
Okay, so recognizing people always reserve the right to comment, but I'm hearing right now there is support for what is in the revised paragraph 8 in the accompanying material. Okay, thank you. Sue?
Excellent, thank you very much. And Diane, I'm glad to see you got a birthday present tailored to your needs. Should we move on to the next slide, which is paragraph 9 and 9A and the related application material there? Just again to walk through what we've done. On paragraph 9, we had some offline comments that we could be a little bit more direct. The construct could be more direct. So we've amended that to just say evaluate the relevance and reliability. And the construct there now is the same as extant 500, although of course extant uses consider rather than evaluate. On 9A, a number of you had comments that the construct was rather complex and it was over caveated. So we have taken out a lot of the nested qualifiers and also added a reference to the attributes to link back to paragraph 9B, 9 little b, as opposed to 9 big A, which is confusing. That was it on the requirements. On the application material, on A28A, we added that paragraph to address the feedback that we'd had around the meaning of the term information intended to be used as audit evidence and the sort of connection with the phrase audit evidence as well. On paragraph A29B, we revised the subheading to clarify that it relates to relevance and reliability and performing audit procedures as part of that evaluation. Revised A29BA to highlight that audit procedures to evaluate relevance and reliability may be performed concurrently with the audit procedure in which the information is used. That concept is in extant in paragraph A61. And then we've streamlined the application material again in response to some of the feedback that we had from yourselves. On A29G, the documentation of relevance and reliability, there were a number of offline comments here, and we've clarified the guidance to align the wording with the requirements. And we concluded that the last sentence wasn't needed. One of the board had noted that it was necessary in some circumstances to document when information is not reliable. We agreed, and we felt that's actually already covered in 230, where we're talking about significant judgments. So we felt that from the feedback it wasn't helpful, so that's deleted. On A60A and A to A60C, which is the application material addressing accuracy and completeness, Diane, another birthday gift. We added an example about journal entries, so where completeness may be applicable. On A60B, we indicated that accuracy and completeness is ordinarily applicable for information generated from the entity's information system. And we revised it to address the concerns that were expressed about there being a reference about it not being practicable. But so we've amended that, I think, hopefully to be more, I don't know, to give less wriggle room to suggest that people might not do the right thing, I guess. And then A60C was just streamlined to reflect the changes in A29BA. So that's a summary of what we've done in paragraphs 9 and 9A. We had a fair amount of feedback on that. So I, again, be interested to hear your feedback on what we've done to address attempt to address the feedback we've had.
Isabel.
Yes, thanks, and thanks to the task force for the changes you made. On 9A, you dealt with 2 of my 3 points. The one point that has not been resolved is the circularity of 9A, because to be able to determine if something is an audit evidence, you need to obtain audit evidence about the accuracy and completeness. So the circularity is still there. My other comment is for later. Thank you.
Fernando.
Thank you, Sue. I like the changes. I think they're pretty straightforward, easy to understand, and most of all, of everything, I think it will drive consistency in the application. Thanks.
Wendy.
Thank you. I'm going to put in, I reserve the right to come back once we have this all together, because I feel like we're in pieces. But the only 9 and 9A, I still wonder whether or not they can be combined, but I leave that to the task force's judgment. And then the part that I want to come back on, maybe when I have a chance to go through the whole thing together, is I worry about the whether, where applicable, are applicable, how we come to that, whether or not when I get through all the application guidance, I still have enough information to determine what's enough and where applicable applies and what kind of documentation is needed. But I'm not sure whether when I'm done with the whole standard, I'll still have that same comment. So just note it. Thank you.
Josephine.
Thank you again, Sue and the team. Delighted with these changes. Also dealt with a couple of issues that I had a few challenges with. The only thing I would just suggest is that we have draw conclusions throughout. And I think in our foundational standards, we talk about draw reasonable conclusions. So just something to noodle on whether that's quite right. Dan's smiling at me. Clearly, you've already thought about that. And then in A60B, you've crossed out determination, but the requirement is a determination. So I think we probably just have to make sure that's lined up with the requirement. That's all. And I personally don't have an issue with the circularity. I see it as iterative. So that's it. Thank you again.
I should have said Julie sent her apologies today. She was caught up in the travel nightmare that was going on the East Coast last night and was due to join us by Zoom this morning, but she's on a plane right now. But Tanya is going to present Julie's comments.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And Julie did make it to Toronto. I just got a text, so all good. Similar to Wendy's comments on 9A, Julie was happy with the changes. They thought it improved the document, but would again ask the task force to consider if it would be simpler to kind of go back to the March version where 9 and 9A were combined.
This will come up, and I think we just have to. I heard some people like this current construction this way. It doesn't seem, I know Wendy said something about this, it doesn't seem like this would be a fatal flaw for going out in ED if it were constructed this way, right? Am I reading the right thing? Okay. Yeah.
Just to respond on that, the task force has tried numerous attempts to try and combine it. And the challenge really is because you've got an evaluate and you've got to consider in there, and the structure becomes incredibly complicated. It's not a case of just lifting it up and dropping it in as a separate bullet. I'm sure we can have a go, yet another go. But if anyone who likes that kind of thing would like to suggest an alternative, we'd be very happy to receive it.
At the same time, you have a lot to do, and I think you get the sense of this board that the current construction would be fine for the purpose of a consultation. Okay, so back to you, Tanya.
Yeah, sorry, I just had one more comment from Julie. I think that we can work through this, but for the record, I just wanted to share her comment. So this is on the application material in paragraph A29BA. The first sentence talks about the audit procedures to evaluate relevance and reliability and the audit procedures applied to the information. I know we've been talking about, whether it's a two-step process, if those are two different sets of procedures or not. She was just wondering, should we be specific for what we meant by the second set of audit procedures? In some offline comments with or discussions with Dan, I think that, I think it is that there are two different sets of procedures that can be performed either, sequentially or concurrently. It's just maybe taking a look to see if there's any more clarification that we can make to that.
Billy?
Yes, Tom, I just wanted to come in on Isabel's comment, and happy for Dan or someone to come in if I get this wrong. But Isabel, you made the point about the circularity, and I think also maybe just to give direction to the task force, because otherwise this is going to continue to come up. We've used the same construct as an extant, so then that implies that we've got circularity in extant as well. So what we try to do here is the new paragraph A29BA, where we talk about evaluating the relevance and reliability of evidence. We've moved it up to that section, so it covers the evaluation of relevance and reliability in total for all attributes that may be applicable. We've made a reference from accuracy and completeness in A60 to this paragraph. And what we try to explain in this paragraph is that ordinarily that evidence you will obtain that evidence concurrently with the procedures you plan to perform on the information. And we thought that was helping with the comment on circularity. Thank you, Tom.
Shall we?
Thank you, Tom. Good morning. And thanks Sue and task force and staff for the great work in turning the document around. It sounds like there's a conclusion on 9A already, but just want to add on my perspective. So similar to Wendy and Julie, and really just, so first of all, the statement, the requirement in 9A, I think has vastly improved over the last version we've seen, so that's great. But just looking at it again, I wonder if we are actually doing the opposite of what we're trying to achieve by suggesting, some people may read it, that accuracy and completeness as attributes are maybe less prevalent than they actually are. by pulling it out and say you need to consider it. And again, I know there's a problem in trying to weave it into 9B, but I thought if there's a way to do it, it will be a much more elegant way of presenting the requirement and giving no less prominence to them. So I just want to add that perspective. But I guess to Tom's point, it's not a fatal flaw in terms of going out as an ED. But if the task force can noodle with it a little bit more, that'll be helpful. Thanks.
One of the things I've been thinking about on this topic is that this is a key issue for some of the regulators. And I sort of like the fact that it's pulled out a little bit. It sort of highlights the purpose. And I just know that the task force has been conscious of many of the comments that have tried so many different formulations right now. And I just sort of think about best use of their time region. So, points are all well taken. And I think they've tried, you're probably up to 150 different iterations of this and have seemed to fail. But one of the benefits that I hadn't really thought about until I saw this version was it puts the issue of accuracy and completeness front and center. And we have a paragraph that you could point to that still highlights that specific issue. Sue, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I've got a feeling Billy has probably dealt with the major part of the feedback, which was that circularity point, which I can assure you is something we've discussed extensively in the task force as well, and the combining point as well. Thank you, Tom, for the steer there. So I'll move on to paragraph 11. There wasn't anything in paragraph 10. That's the management experts, you'll recall. So there's we've not picked anything there. But paragraph 11. We had feedback from yourselves around the clarity of paragraph 11, including whether the requirement was always driving the auditor to obtain alternative information as opposed to maybe first plugging the holes by looking at whether other procedures could be performed and so on, and whether the construct was overly complex, including the references to attempt to attain and additional or alternative information. So we reflected on that and concurred, and we've simplified the requirements to really just deal with when there are doubts about relevance and reliability and the expected actions we would see there. The wording we have in there now comes from 505, which talks about the auditor determining whether modifications or additions to the audit procedures are necessary to resolve doubts. So that's consistent. And we simplified paragraph 11B, I think, hopefully. And then in relation to application material to paragraph 11 on A74A, we moved the order to keep the flow so that we were dealing first with relevance and then reliability. And A75B, we amended the application material to explain that the auditor may be able to resolve any doubts about the relevance and reliability by performing additional procedures on the information that they had already obtained, and also that there may be circumstances where the auditor needs to obtain alternative or additional information. So I think that reflects the elements of the feedback we got about the different types of responses. So take your comments on paragraph 11 and the relevant application material, please.
Okay, paragraph 11. Lynn.
I like it.
Short and sweet. By silence, do we have a lot of Lynn's here? Oh, Chawei.
I just want to come in to say I like it a lot too. The changes, I think it removed a lot of the complexity in the previous version.
This is an escalation. We went to I like it a lot. Tanya.
I also like it. Just a quick editorial for the intro to B, given the kind of the intro to that bullet, just to consider changing it to consider the effect of the matter if the doubts cannot be resolved. Just knowing that the intro to 11 says if the auditor has doubts, the auditor shall. sorry, that was in B, not in C. Or maybe it's just the way that the markup is showing up. Sounds good. Thanks.
It'll be checked. Okay, Josephine.
I also like it, Sue. Thank you very much. The only thing I was thinking, you might have a chat with those who actually codify our requirements in law. And therefore, if you're splitting the doubts, you're not talking about doubts about relevance or reliability throughout the whole sentence in A or in B, if that causes problem. Silly thing, I know, but just check maybe with those who codify in law. Thanks.
Okay. Tanya, you're straight card. Okay, you didn't want to come back in. So,
Thank you. Josephine, I think your neighbour thinks it's possibly okay, the construct, but we'll work on it. We will definitely check, and Tanya will take a look at that drafting. Thank you. Okay, I think we're on to paragraphs 13 and 13A now. So next slide, please. So I think in the discussions on Monday, you were broadly supportive of the paragraphs 13 and 13A. We haven't got any further changes to the requirements. I know there, I think it was Julie questioned the ordering of the paragraphs, and we did discuss that further, and we've concluded that we're not proposing a change. The 13A we felt flows more naturally and complements 13. And at the end of the day, these requirements are not applied in a linear fashion anyway. So we have considered it. We feel that we still have the order probably appropriately. On the application material, which is where we are proposing some changes, on A77A, on Monday there were comments that we needed more balance to address the evaluation of audit evidence from risk assessment procedures. So we've added a sentence to 77A. I'm losing the number of A's here. Just to refer to the application, the evaluation under paragraph 35 of 315. So it's just a reminder that paragraph 13 relates to all audit evidence. On A77B, there was editorial changes to clarify and streamline the guidance that we had. And in A77C, we had offline feedback that the last sentence was repetitive and not really needed, so we've killed that one. So that's the summary of what we've done on the application material to 13A. If there's feedback on that, please.
Josephine.
Sue, thanks again to you and the task force. Absolutely delighted with this. Again, it's back to my point earlier that now it's very clear that audit evidence is gathered and assessed throughout the whole process under the umbrella of ISA 500. The only niggle I have, and it doesn't need to be resolved now, but perhaps go away and think about it. In A77B, it still says in the in the third sentence that the auditor's evaluation required by paragraph 13A is made in the context of the requirements of ISA 330, making up the numbers now. So it's actually would be easy to resolve if we just said the auditor's evaluation required by 13A in the context of the requirements of ISA 330 is focused on. So we're not assuming that that's only tied to 330, because we already make it very clear that ISA 315 paragraph 35 also has the same requirement. So it's just making it, it's not suggesting that 13A doesn't apply to 315 if we just make those tiny little tweaks.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Anyone else? Sue?
Thank you. We won't go into the drafting, but we will certainly take it away and have a look. Thank you. Okay. Since we're doing well, do we get the bonus extra of the objectives? And so if we move on to the next one, So there were some changes in the document that we sent to you relating to the objectives and the definition. So if we could perhaps just pick those up. I run through the changes we've proposed on the objective. We had offline comments that were included a suggestion about paragraph 6A that it should state that the auditor designs and performs audit procedures to be able to draw reasonable conclusions on which to base the opinion and reports. So we've, on reflection, we felt that was a helpful addition. And we've changed 6B to strengthen the link to the auditor's conclusion about sufficient appropriate audit evidence in accordance with 330. So those were the changes we're proposing on the objectives. On the definitions, there was a small editorial on 7B to align with paragraph 6A, which was talking about drawing conclusions. And then in the application material on the definition in A3J, we included guidance or revised the guidance to respond to the comments we had on Monday. And we integrated paragraph A3K into A3J to make it clear that the quality of the audit evidence depends on both the relevance and reliability of the information intended to be used as audit evidence and the effectiveness of design of the audit procedures and the audit application of those procedures, or the auditor's application of those procedures. And we also added a reference to the effectiveness of the design of the audit procedures, which I think came up in the board meeting. So there's a number of changes there. I think if we could get your feedback on those, that will then help us on the main parts of the standard to progress. Thank you.
Wendy, since you were well disciplined in an earlier round on these paragraphs, I'll call on you first.
All right, thank you, Tom. And at the risk of wandering off to an island, 6A.
Oh no, we send people to the island, as you remember.
Okay. Center wandering. In reflection, I'm not, I know there was a lot of comments on 6A and adding to be able to draw reasonable conclusions on which to base the auditor's opinion and report. I'm wondering if it's needed. If you drop it, could 7B just stand on its own, which is that the auditor uses to draw conclusions. The challenge I'm having is, are we making it more complex? Are we bringing in 330, not 330? And it's slightly different language in A versus B. So I'm just recommending the task force look at that again and see what others think as to whether or not we really need the end of 6A, keep it quite crisp. Thank you.
Josephine.
Thank you, Sue. I'm extremely supportive of the changes that you've made to 6A and 6B. I think it works a lot better now. It's much more aligned with our foundational standards. In terms with 7B, that was where I thought, are we missing the reasonable in between draw and reasonable? And on A3J, I've simply written a fabulous next to that. So thank you very much.
We're in good moods this week. So I guess the only thing the issue we should take is Wendy raised a question about 6A and 7. She got a counterpoint with Josephine, who was quite happy with the construction. I don't know, Sue, whether you want to react to it and then make sure the board is, if there was a difference of opinion, you get a sense of the board on it.
I'm not sure. It's probably the straight answer, Tom. I think it was only sort of two.
But does anyone have the same feeling as Wendy on this, or are they happy with where the task force is on this project? The reason I say this is that, Isabel.
Yes, it was not exactly on this, but I'm really happy with what the task force has done. Just wanted a placeholder question when we will do the conforming change to the auditor's report, because I don't know where the changes we have made in 6, with what kind of consequence they will have in the auditor's responsibility in the auditor's report. So that's a placeholder for next time.
Noted. Wendy, did you want to come back? I see your 10 still up.
Sorry, I will noodle offline, plus on the other one, you asked for some recommendations on combining 9 and see whether or not there's any tweaks that I would recommend.
Okay, we're always open for tweaking. Chun-Wei.
I don't have any recommendation for tweaking, but just want to let Wendy know that she's not entirely alone. I read it and I find it unwieldy, but I can understand why we need all those words and all those constructs. But I can't think of a way to simplify it. So I'm not contributing constructively, but just to let Wendy know that she's not entirely alone.
We'll keep you on this island for now, but again, based upon the reading here, is if this came back in the way that it is right now for the next meeting, you will not have a vote against the standard on the basis is my read of this discussion. So we're always open for great ideas, but at some point we'll have to put pens down. Okay, so.
Thank you. Thank you all for that, and we'll certainly reflect on those comments. As there's a couple of minutes still within the time slot, and Isabel provided such a beautiful segue into the conforming and consequential amendments. I thought I would firstly just remind you that if anybody does have any further feedback on that, can you please make sure we get that, because obviously that will be presented as part of the package. I think the changes we've made will impact the ones in, I think, 330 and 540. I'm looking at Dan to see. I think there's a couple that come out now, don't they? Yeah, 315 and 540. Yeah, so those will come out. Obviously, the package will be represented to you, but if there is anything else anyone has, please let us know. Isabel, to your point about the changes to the audit report, we did cover that in the issues paper. We'll sort of circle back after this board meeting to just reconfirm, but our intention was probably not to make changes to the audit report on the basis of what we have so far. So that's just managing the expectations. I think we felt that what is in the audit report is sort of well constructed at the moment, and it still reflects what we have here. But we'll certainly re-review that before we come back. And I think that Tom has probably covered everything. I'm probably looking at Dan and Phil if there's anything else that I've missed. I think thank you for the feedback. It puts us in good shape to work through and come back in September.
Okay, I think this is the final moment. If anyone wants to raise anything of issue or concern as the task force goes to draft in a final exposure draft for approval for consideration in September, this is the moment to speak. Ada?
Maybe, and just want to thanks to fabulous job. We've also made some changes to the introductory paragraphs, so they're not highlighted in the document, but I guess we would encourage you to read them, and if you have any comments, provide us with the feedback, because then we can cover that bit off ahead of September as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada.
Sorry, Ada, this version doesn't include those. That was just a task force version, I think, I'm afraid.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we've done all this work and we didn't present it. Yeah.
Some people were getting jittery here. They were like, I want to see it. Where are those paragraphs? Can't contain the excitement. Jim or Janine, anything you want to add before we close the audit evidence session? Janine?
Nothing new, I think.
Only thing, what I still think is important for the ED is where in the explanatory memorandum to clarify the thought process, why there are things in as a requirement versus as application material, because of the balance that is in there. And I think that's important also to get feedback on. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Janine. So great job to the task force. Sue, thank you for your leadership. Phil and Dan, thank you for all the hard work to get the document in such great shape. Based upon what I've heard today, is that we expect I'll use the term relatively smooth approval in September. I don't want to raise expectations too much, but I think we're in really good shape to get an exposure draft out in September. And I don't hear anyone raising fatal flaws at this moment. Okay, are we happy to move to? Okay, we're gonna take about a 2-second pause as the teams switch off the table. We're gonna go to the PI ED. Great work again, Phil and Dan. Thank you so much. Could we get the PI team up at the table? Welcome, Natalie and Kalina. You ready? Josephine, we're back to listed entity and PI, the big moment.
Great. Thank you and good morning, everybody. I've said that a few times now already, but here we are back to our morning PI. And thanks everybody for all your comments on Monday. That was very helpful. Thanks as well to Natalie and Kalina and Billy working in the background with the task force, helping put through all the amendments and going through all the comments. I mean, to be fair, the majority of comments we actually got, if we were in terms of volume, we're on the explanatory memorandum. So obviously we'll be working on those in the background and still intend to get that to you next week. There were overall, if we stand back, very few comments on 700 itself. Mainly most of the comments in the actual exposure draft itself came in on the 260 piece. And I'd already given you a bit of a heads up yesterday about what we might be covering. But if we just go through the key changes. So if we could go to that first slide, please, Michelle. Lovely. So as you'll see, a couple of comments that we probably could simplify the requirement by removing the term only. And so we've done that. And then, of course, we were asked to just give a little bit more clarification in respect to the fact that the independence of requirements are applicable to the audit of certain entities by adding in there that, for example, public interest entities as well. And that was in the requirement 28C. If we move to the next slide, please. Again, in the application material, we made sure the term certain entities was clarified by referencing to PIs in the IAASB code. And then we also refined that middle wording where we talk about situations where the auditor determines that it's appropriate to apply those independence requirements to other types of entities. So we've refined that wording there. So that wording that begins relevant ethical requirements may also. And then we also asked to remove the illustration in the actual application material in respect to the basis of opinion when IAASB codes relevant. Didn't think that was appropriate. Board members didn't think that was appropriate in the application materials, so we've taken that out. We did have to do a little conforming amendment in here, which we'd forgotten, which is changing the word pertaining to related. So that's now aligned with all our quality management standards. And then if we could move to actually, Michelle, can you move 2 slides ahead rather than immediately to the 260 slide for me? That's the one, perfect. So one of the things that we were asked to do in respect of the basis of opinion was to make it absolutely, the request was to make it as tied to the code as possible. And that would mean adding that additional wording that this is applicable to audits of financial statements of public interest entities, together with the ethical requirements for audits of financial statements. Now, the task force recognized that whilst it might be technically correct, although it's not completely clear in the code, in some cases the term's used and in some not, but technically you might consider it's correct. It's clear when you're in the audit report that you're in an audit of financial statements. And we felt that that was pretty implicit from the fact you're reading an auditor's report. And we were really trying to keep the wording as simple in the basis for opinion as possible. So in the end, the task force decided that it wasn't actually necessary to add that additional wording, audits of financial statements. So, but we did want to at least let the board know that this was put forward as a suggestion, and just leave the board to reflect on that, and we'll pop back to that as well. So, Michelle, if you would like to go to the previous slide for me, thank you. And then, as I mentioned before, we have actually changed the application material in paragraph A29. We weren't able to get rid of the may altogether, but we had those 3 options. We thought in the end, if we either revert back to what we previously have presented in A32A, which you see marked out at the moment, or we address the application material as part of addressing the requirement in paragraph 17 when we work on track 2 of the project, or we, or if the board's happy, we put the ED out with this new wording in A29. So we do have some options there we want the board to consider. So if we go forward then to question number 3, we're being asked to approve the ED, but I think that's probably just a little bit too soon. We probably need, Tom, feedback from the board on just generally 260, please. And then also if they have any reflection on that request by one board member.
The slides probably know that I love efficiency, but I do think we have to ask people if they have any reaction to the proposed changes. Isabel?
I'm still not very clear on the message we want to convey. Do we want to require the auditor to communicate to who's charged with governance, in addition to the fact that they have to communicate the independent standard, to communicate in addition that it's, let's say, the independent standard for a listed entity? So do we want to require it, or do we just want to say they can do it if they want? Because the way I read the last sentence of A29, which, by the way, is not very cost compliant, I understand they may do it, but it's normal. They may do it because it's in application material and we cannot require something in the application material. But will a reader understand they may do it if they want? So if they may do it if they want, I'm fine. If they have to do it, maybe the wording will drive an inappropriate behavior.
Do you want to react to that?
Yes, well, this is our sticking point. So as I explained on Monday, the actual requirement is that the statement that the engagement teams and others in the firm, when applicable, etc., have complied with the relevant ethical requirements regarding independence. And it would seem rather odd that when you're making that statement to those charged with governance, you wouldn't state what those relevant ethical requirements are. In this situation, we have a slightly different scenario that the auditor has to publicly disclose information about those independence requirements when the differential requirements are applied in their report. So they're making an additional disclosure, which is something that one would probably like to communicate to those charged with governance, particularly if you're in a situation where you've had a conversation that you've applied the PI independence requirements, even though the entity is not a PI. So we felt when we came into this that it would be helpful for the practitioner to think about whether they need to include that in their conversation. But as I say, it's because of the May and because 17 is more implicit than explicit, we're getting ourselves into a little bit of a conundrum, which is why the task force think actually perhaps the best way forward with this is to not deal with 260 at all in the exposure draft, just concentrate on 700 and then deal with the 260 as part of track 2, including whether we need to think about that particular requirement and whether something needs to be more explicit. So that's why we've given the options there.
Could we get the options back on the screen? Well, last slide, previous slide. No, I think it's the one for. Okay. Veli, you want to come in on this point?
Yes, thank you, Tom. And I wanted to ask Michelle to go back to that because I do think we really need every board member to indicate which option they prefer. Isabel, I can completely understand when you look at 260, you want there to be either a requirement or not. But the bottom line is we're not looking at 260 paragraph 17 at the moment. We're looking at 260 paragraph 17 in the context of the change we're making to ISA 700. And I think to Josephine's point, we are simply trying to operationalize the requirement in the code through this track of the project proposal. So if we have to go to considering requirement, listed entity or PI or whatever, that is something that we need to do in track 2. And then we really just need to resign ourselves to the fact that it doesn't belong in track 1 and we can carry on. Also, just to remember that, like I said, we're trying to operationalize R400.20 in the ethics code, and ethics that did not indicate that there should be communication to those charged with governance, while there are many other places in the code where there are requirements to communicate to those charged with governance. So that was a very deliberate decision they took. So maybe with that background, if we can just get an indication which of those 3 options board members prefer.
Veli, can I ask you a question on this point? And I see, you probably coming in on this point too. Based upon what I just heard from you, can I infer to you that the third option here is would be your preferred option?
Yes, I think that's what Josephine indicated as well.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So,
I think I'm in a different place I agree with what you said, Willie, but I do not think that we need to defer this to the track 2. Just deal with it now. I'm happy with option 1, get it out and move along.
Eric, your point's something different, right? Or is this on this point? Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I was very happy with the original wording, which is option 2. I found the new option, the wording in the new option, the very long sentence at the end, I found it very complicated, and I think people will find that a bit confusing. I found the original wording much clearer. So I was supportive of the original, reverting back to the previous application material. And like Edo, I think we should try and resolve it now rather than waiting.
Sachiko?
Sorry, actually, it's a different point.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's deal with this point first. I guess maybe the way to deal with this first is to ask people, maybe get a sense of who is for option 3, which would be a deferral right now by show of hands. Okay, that's not a preferred approach. So now we've narrowed the options within this to the first 2, which is really new application material A29 or revert back to A32A. Who's in favor of the new paragraph material A29 by show of hands? The task force, please raise your hand too if you're on the task force and you prefer that. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's a slight majority for that. You know, I'm fine with 29, relatively indifferent. But for those who prefer A32A, would going out with A29 as it's been redrafted be a reason for you to dissent from this ED? Lynn?
I wouldn't dissent, but I do agree with Eric that that last sentence is really hard to read. So I'd like the last sentence of A29 simplified or divided up into bits, and then I'd be happy with A29.
You may be able to do something with right before the because and say the reason for this is that an auditor may be required to provide or something along that line. But you would give some discretion staff to like this would be almost like the ability to make editorial changes between the vote and not. And would you like to come back in? Okay. So when and if when we vote for this, we will be voting on A29 as currently constructed with an editorial trying to break up the sentence maybe at the word because with some discretion, as long as you do not change the fundamental meaning. Are people content with that? Josephine, just want to turn it back to you on this particular point, and then we'll get one last round of comments or any further comments on any other topic in the ED.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we will go with A29. We will just, Tom, I think that's a really good idea. We'll just take that, and I agree, Isabel, looking at it again, it's not very the non-cusp sentence, and just break that into 2 pieces, primarily around the because statement. So we could probably even say something full stop, for example, because the auditor. That's fantastic, thank you. And then just to see if there are any reflections on the other request by a board member to extend the language, which is in the next slide, please, Michelle, which is that's it, perfect. So to add this additional language, audits of financial statements of, if there are any comments of board members that they would like to see that definitely added in, then that would be helpful.
I don't see anyone raising their card and they're comfortable with the task force's decision not to include it.
Right, thank you. And then the only other point I did want to raise is that we are missing an S right at the beginning, paragraph 28C, where we've changed applicable, where we've deleted only to audits. We're missing an S on the last change, the audits of those entities. That's the only other point I wanted to raise. But that's it then. Sachiko had her card up and put it down. Is that on that point? Thank you, Sachiko.
I'm glad he caught that because that was a fatal flaw for me. Okay, any other comments for the task force based upon what we've seen today? Philly, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Yeah, Tom, just before we go to the vote, I just wanted to draw board members' attention to the agenda paper 2, section 3, that address 2 due process matters. So just to place on the record that the task force obviously thinks that there are no significant matters that have not been brought to the attention of the IAASB, and that the task force also does not believe that the consultation paper or field testing is needed at this stage of the project. So we can go ahead with the voting on the ED. So I just wanted, because I know we've had many discussions, just draw your attention back to that. And if anybody has a reflection on that, welcome to take it. Otherwise, Tom, we can proceed.
Okay, any comments on what Billy just said? Ready, Josephine? So, okay, so before we go, I just want to make sure that the board is happy to vote on the exposure draft as it relates to pies. And you understand what we're gonna, is anyone unclear on what we will be voting on? People from time to time have said yes. Okay, we're gonna do it this way. We have only 16 board members voting today because 2 are absent. But based upon what I'm hearing, I will ask for those who want to vote in support of the ED first. So raise your hand if you're in support of the ED. Okay. There are 16 board members who raise their hands. That means there are no one abstaining and no one dissenting to this thing. So first of all, congratulations, Josephine, and the PI task force and the staff involved. So great, thank you for getting this out. This is part of our important commitment to convergence with our colleagues over at IAASB and the IAASB code. So it is a strategically important project for us. Jim, I don't know if you want to share any reflections from the CAG perspective.
Other than to note that this has been discussed numerous times with the CAG, and I think if we were to have a CAG meeting now, I think they'd appreciate the clarity that you've added to some of these changes today, and I think the CAG would appreciate what the board has done.
Thank you. Janine?
Yeah, congratulations. No further comments. I think good discussions, good changes made, and I'm very much looking forward to the outcome of the consultation, in particular the views, of course, of users of financial statements, what they think about the transparency part. Thanks.
Thank you, Janine. Josephine, congratulations. I don't know if you want to have any concluding remarks for the session.
Yes, thank you. I thought another thing I wanted to mention was it's also representative of our agility, and splitting this into 2 tracks and working really quickly to get this to get the resolution between the IAASB code and our standards out there earlier, and was really, really good. Just again to thank the task force, but particularly Kalina and Natalie for turning all this around very, very quickly this week. Really appreciate it. And thank you all to the board members for all your helpful comments on the explanatory memorandum. As I say, you'll get that early next week, and for fatal flaw on Friday next week. So it doesn't stop here ever, does it? It keeps going. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Okay, we've reached believe it or not, the end of our public sessions for this week, which has been a really, really productive week. Want to thank Michelle, Armand, the whole team at IFAC who've been in support and made this meeting. We could have been a little out of practice with so many people in the room, but made this meeting go so smoothly. and I want to thank all of you. I said this last night, but I should say it on the public record for all your efforts on our behalf, board members and TAs. It's easy to forget that you're volunteers. You all have your own day jobs, and we appreciate your service to the public interest. Before I have a few minor administrative remarks, I wanted to invite Janine to make any remarks of your overall observation of the meeting.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I think when I look back on this week, that there was a very high quality of discussions of topics. Also, it was not merely providing comments, but also on those comments that were made more often to really have good in-depth discussion. And I think that's very important in the public interest, and to reach also some conclusions there as a board based on the different perspectives of members on the board. That's an important thing. So I'm very happy what I noticed with how the board worked this week. Very hard, a lot of work done, and also the quality of the papers and the progression made this week is very impressive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Jim, any general remarks you want to say based upon your observations?
Just my main observation is this has been a process for a number of these items we've discussed, and I appreciate that the board has considered the CAG's input, and I see it fairly consistently. And so whether or not you actually adopt one of our recommendations is one thing or another, but I know you have considered that, and I think that that's a good way forward.
I'll ask anyone, any board member, if any observations you'd like to share before we bring the public sessions to a close. I just want to say that we've made some really important decisions this week that I'm excited about. This marks the almost my third anniversary as chair of this board, and I'm excited about the next term with all the decisions we've made. We're at a really important juncture on a number of key public interest projects. So I'm really excited to continue to work with you in the coming weeks and months. Edo.
Yes, and I was thinking a little bit about a session that we had in respect of sustainability, where we're adopting more innovative, quicker, more agile approaches, which I'm tremendously in favor of. And I would like to see how we can port those to the other standard setting processes that we have to increase our agility and speed there as well.
Hear, hear. I think that's a really important point. And I think, as I remember talking about earlier this week, both Bill and Kaiue said we talk about some of the public interest, but speed to deliver is a public interest matter in and of itself. So let us, my favorite topic, minutes. We will distribute the minutes, and we're on a more expedited path on minutes issuance than we had been in the past, and they'll be posted for your approval at the September 2022 meeting. We're already, believe it or not, this year is flying by, thinking about nearly to the third quarter. We had scheduled a potential video conference for July 20th. It's Diane's birthday this week, so we're giving more gifts. We will not be having the video conference on July 20. So we will next meet as a full board. I know there's task force meetings and other meetings going on. In September, the board meeting will be held here in New York. Hopefully, Warren, your visa will be sorted by then, and we look forward to seeing you in person. September 12th to the 16th. We haven't finalized the agenda, but I'm sure Philly has 16 spreadsheets already developed to help us do so. The next CAG meeting being held virtually, with including IAASB's and ours is September 6th through the 8th. We'll let you know if you need to attend also virtually. And just so you know, if you're marking your calendars, when will these papers begin to be posted? They will start being posted probably around August 22nd for the September board meeting, and all the material should be up by August 26th. So we're going to bring our public session to a close. We will break now. We're going to do a 20-minute break, and then we'll return to executive at 10 a.m. Thank you.